of all, I'm going to ask, I'm going to open it up, and I got to tell you, when we first started talking about doing this panel, I worried that I didn't know enough about what civic hacking was and how that worked for people. So, do you guys each want to tell us kind of what you would think about your definition of civic hacking might be? It looks like you're going to get to lead us off, Laurie.
Sure. Great. Sure. So civic hacking, each of us will have our own definition. I'm sure everyone in the room has one. But to me, it's around engaging with the public. And civic hacking is doing things that are for the greater good for a location, whether that be a city, a town, a rural environment. The hacking part of it is how do you rally troops, whether they be volunteer or professional, to provide solutions to meet the needs of that community.
Go for it, Scott.
Civic hacking is simplified is the fact that you don't have to have permission. It's if you see a problem in your community, you see a solution for your community, we now have the tools and the technologies available to us that we just go do it. We don't need the mayor or the city or the governor or the president to say, yes, it's okay. Just go do it and go build it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Civic hacking for me is also, along with what Laurie and Scott said, enabling the infrastructure and the framework to make that happen. For instance, as a data scientist, I'm extremely interested in making the relevant data available to the public, so that they can actually do like grassroots efforts to improve the community and everything. So to me, that's an essential part of civic hacking.
So the advantage of going last is I can follow the words of wisdoms of those that came before me. It's pretty much, I agree with everybody. Civic hacking to me is the ability for me to make an impact on my community. How do I help my community move forward? How do I provide the things that I like, but also enable other people to build, deploy, and find the things they like? And it's interesting that, you know, at least from my perspective, I always talk about it from the technological point of view, but literally civic hacking can be from any point of view. It doesn't have to be technology, it doesn't have to be wireless. It's doing good for this community as a whole on behalf of others.
All right, why hacking? I mean, why do we have to call it hacking? Because that seems so bad, you know? We learned that hackers are bad people that really tore apart systems and made problems. Why do we have to, is it the bad boy image that we're looking for? And
It's the mentality of, you know, technology hackathons, basically giving yourselves design constraints. You only have 2 days, you only can use this API or these API sets. This is the problem, go solve it, but solve it in a constrained amount of time with constrained resources, and get teams to rally around ideas. So it's not about here's the pathway, it's here's the destination. We have a short amount of time. Let's be creative and let's do that. So that, you know, calling it hacking, calling it hackathons is coming out of the the technology industry of just locking people in rooms for a day or two to create good breakthrough innovations by design constraints.
All right, Raj, were you going to say something on that, Laurie?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, it's a term that needs a marketing campaign. In the technology community, certainly hacking is something people have started a long time ago. Kids hack and students hack, and they get it. But to the outside community, hack sounds like you're breaking into my bank account. I don't like that. But it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about safe solutions that are really inspirational and exciting.
All right, Raj, are you going to answer that question? Or you don't have to. I'll give you another question if you want.
All right.
All right. No, keep in mind. All right, so you now are working with young people on this front, right? Where all these people who are coming for the internship program you're doing are all college students that are doing it. Does this concept of hacking work more for young people than it does for us of a more mature perspective?
That's probably true. I think when students talk about hacking, the mentality is more the idea of, I guess, tinkering, like the whole, tinkering in the garage kind of ethos, or whatever the modern equivalent of that is, which is tinkering on your laptop or with an Arduino processor or all those kinds of things. So basically, hacking is often used synonymously with the creativity associated with sort of free tinkering.
So that concept plays more with young people than it does for older people? Does that keep more of us from the older people from playing a part in it?
As long as you accept the definition of tinkering, I think anyone can tinker and create things.
All right. Roger, do you seem to have a perspective on this?
Yeah, hacking's not just for the young. Adult people can do it too. And it's actually interesting because, everybody has a different perspective on the things they like. And as we become an aging society, the baby boomers are aging, there are huge opportunities to do really, really good things. And a lot of people with a lot of talent and a lot of desire to stay active and keep moving forward. So this actually becomes a nice catalyst to actually move the society forward for the good of all.
One of the best hackathons, social good hackathons I was involved with was the 7 Billion Actions program that you're talking about. This is back a couple of years ago, we reached the 7 billion population milestone, and the UN Population Fund, which is kind of like the Census Bureau for the world, reached out to technology folks and said, look, we have 6 months till the big milestone, and this is the first billion-person milestone that we're reaching where we have the technology that allows people, more than half the world's population to connect directly with each other.
With the technology, mobile technology.
With mobile and with social, with internet, it allows for more than half the world to connect each other. So what can we do with this? And so we challenged SAP, we gave data sets to SAP professionals, and they just knocked it out. We worked through IBM to do a full day of hackathon on IBM's Centennial Day of Service with a location in New York and a location in Boston. And we got a bunch of people from Mars and SAP and IBMers together, and they were definitely a baby boomer generation, and knocked it out of the park with the ideas that came out of it.
All right, so that's your example. I was going to ask our panel to kind of select what they thought was one of the best examples of how this civic hacking is playing part. So UN, 7 billion things. Raj,
Yeah, one of them for sure.
Okay, Raj, what was one that, tell us about the one that you were doing, one of the ones for the summit that you were telling me about, 911.
Yeah, so one of the projects that Data Science for Social Good is doing this summer is with the 911 Center in Atlanta. What they've given us is all of their data. What that contains, data about every 911 call made, including timestamps, locations, routes taken by police, ambulance, fire, etc. All kinds of data about how long it took for different things, how long it took to respond, everything you can think of. As you can imagine, this is a pretty valuable data set. There's a lot in there. First of all, there's a lot of descriptive stuff in there that allows us to see, just visualize what kind of responses we're getting around the city. Also, what the main challenge is to basically optimize and see if we can improve response times. How can we do that? Like find better routes, find better placements for police or fire trucks or ambulances, all of that. You can imagine that this kind of project can have a huge impact. It can actually save quite a few lives. So this is only one of the 5 projects that we are doing this summer in Data Science for Social Good.
All right, Laurie, tell us about Midtown Buzz. I bet that's going to be the one that you select as your example, right?
Sure. And I'm going to talk more about models of what is going on, use a couple examples of what's going on in Midtown Buzz. Part of our goal is to look at transportation. Probably everyone in this room has had trouble parking in Midtown, maybe. So if you're riding your bike or if you're taking MARTA actually goes to Midtown. What would help people do more clean living? And so we have two apps we've launched. One is called One Bus Away. It's a mobile app that connects you to MARTA and also to the tech trolley for free transportation around Midtown. And it'll grow to extend to the trolley that goes over to Atlantic Station and help into other universities. And basically give people the idea you don't have to drive into Midtown, and that will help reduce some of the traffic issues and ideally some of the air quality issues. But it's an interesting idea of how do you connect a city. Another project we're working on, except that there'll be a breadcrumb thread here, is something called Cycle Atlanta. And this is one for bicyclists who we're trying to encourage, again, more people to be biking and walking and taking mass transit. Well, why don't people bike? Well, there really aren't a whole lot of bike lanes, and the roads are not in the greatest condition. And if you're riding a bike down Ponce, you really are worried about your safety. So how about having an app? This is an app that's launched that tracks where you ride, and now city planners can see that why aren't people going down Ponce? Oh, because they can start asking those questions. If they're not going there, it's a logical way. Let's track where people are going, and now let's make corrective action. What does it mean? Where do we want to increase a bike lane, or how do we encourage more people to use the roads? What's inhibiting that? And the leap I have, where I think it's really interesting to see where this can go, and I think Raj can probably back me up on this, is looking at this combination of a lot of usage and data. So in Cycle Atlanta, The power of that is not so much where am I going to ride today, that's fun and you can track that, but as more and more people show their behavior patterns to urban planners can make new decisions. Let's extrapolate that over to the healthcare area. Georgia Tech does a lot in healthcare IT, and we're doing a lot of work with children's healthcare and with asthma, and what can we do to help children be more aware of their situation so that they take better care of themselves and they're not going to the emergency room as often. So we have apps that go just one-to-one to the children. Well, what if you started tracking where they could opt in and say, I'm not feeling great, or I'm having some kind of challenge, whether it be children or not. And now look at the big data there and say, oh, we have these pockets of incidences, either times of days or location, where there's water, or where there's air quality challenges. Let's go and look at that as a society to change that. So I think this whole idea of civic hacking and looking at big numbers and then starting to do an analysis of what that information shows has great potential.
All right, Roger, you don't get to come up with one. You know why? Because you represent corporate America at this point. At AT&T, big business, right? We've got people who care about many other things besides perhaps the profit motive. We've got Laurie, who's trying to make sure that downtown Atlanta is a better place to be and works at Georgia Tech. And Scott with Hypotamus. I said it right that time, didn't I? Who is really working to make things better. Raj, who cares about having people come together. Why is it that AT&T doesn't care about asthma, about parking, about 911 services, or about the UN's way of doing it? What I'm getting at is, why is it that we have to have volunteers do this instead of having corporate America take it on? That was a hard question, wasn't it? And you don't. That was some of these. Now, anybody can answer that question. I put Roger on it. Why is it that it has to be volunteers instead of the corporate motive taking up the profit motive, taking care of it for us?
So I'll turn the question around on you just a little bit. So if you look at a lot of the major enterprises, and I'll use AT&T as an example, we are actually exposing a lot of our core capabilities to allow the cities to figure out how best that they can take advantage of things. It's almost when you get to the size of an AT&T, it becomes almost a one-size-fits-all because that's the size we play. But if we expose the capabilities we have, we now put some of the control and some of the power close to the people who know what the problems are, know what it is, and they can actually solve those niche problems that is going to fall under everybody's radar. So it gives the community a pride of ownership in that they can actually do things for themselves. And I think that's one of the most important parts of civic hacking is it allows you to kind of drive and put your fingerprint on what your community is going to look like. Because every community is different. Every community has their own social interests that they're looking for, their own unique perspective. That's why I find it hard when you start to look at something like this and say, well, let's pull something that maybe they did in New York. Okay, well, it works in New York, but they have a different lifestyle than we do here. So things they do up there won't work down here. I did a lot of work on trying to bring services over from Japan when I worked for Singular. They live a different life, it's a different style, it doesn't really translate over here. This gives the society, your local community, the opportunity to do things that we would never think of.
Well, I was interviewing David Butler from Coca-Cola last week for a fireside chat at General Assembly, and he was making the point that corporations are about execution. When you're large scale, it's all about execution. It's not about coming up with the ideas. It's not. That's the hard part, is coming up with new ideas. It's the easy part for corporations is to execute. Yeah. And I think it makes me think of anyone who's ever studied positive psychology. Marty Seligman is the father of positive psychology, and he was studying learned pessimism in dogs. Dogs that had shock collars and they were put in a circle, and if they crossed the circle, learned pessimism, which led him to study learned optimism, which you can become more optimistic. But he was studying dogs who had shock collars, and when they crossed a line on the circle, they got shocked. And so they learned pretty quickly, don't cross the line. And so pretty soon they turned off the shock collars and then took the collars off. But yet the dogs would never cross the line. And I have witnessed hackathons and startup weekends done inside large corporations like Coca-Cola, and you can see those corporate folks who have been shocked too many times not to want to cross the line. And I think why you're not seeing corporations come and say it is because the culture is is being shocked with shock collars, right? In some ways, don't rock the boat, execute. So now you're seeing this wave of disruption happening, and larger organizations that are looking for new ways of coming up with new ideas and innovation and disruption themselves. So they'd rather be the disruptors than the disrupted, and so they're utilizing this methodology. So if we got rid of the word hackathon and said, how would you like to learn rapid prototyping? How would you like to learn collaborative ideation? How would you, these are actually beneficial processes and approaches. And I think you're not going to see large-scale top-down, let's solve the whole thing, but you are seeing, being a Gen Xer, I don't like baby boomers and I don't like millennials because they get all the attention. We just don't get the attention. But millennials are very optimistic and are wanting to be involved, and you're seeing corporations get pulled in this direction because their people, their young talent is wanting to put the corporation assets to good.
I just want to add a little bit of what you're saying too. I think that it's not all these isolated entities, that there's engagement between corporations and volunteers. And that can be as far as identifying challenges, it can be as funding hackathons, or it can be saying, we want to encourage those who are creating new apps and services to create their own business model. And that might be that the community needs a service. Maybe the restaurateurs want to figure out how do you drive more traffic in on a Thursday night. How can I work with somebody who's developing an application for restaurants that will bring me more revenue? So part of this open collaboration is to bring all of the people to the table, not just the volunteer community, but those who have a stake in it, and encourage people to have their own model. That if you're not looking for a model, great too, but almost everybody needs to pay the lights or something. But there are opportunities there to collaborate with industry or corporations and the volunteer force.
And old line nonprofits are seeing the same. They're having the same frustrations because they're silos, right? Any siloed organization, any top-down organization with hierarchy isn't used to having this bottom-up disruption. And so you're seeing within the nonprofit community brand spanking new charities that are embracing this networked approach. And instead of having hierarchy, it's networked approach. And I think there's great power when you get the large corporations, the large multinationals, the large nonprofits working with the grassroots, because you can generate a lot of great ideas and then find the right place to scale it.
So do you think that the volunteer economy that's driving civic and social hacking has enough horsepower to keep this change happening? I mean, is it going to be something that you believe is going to be sustainable with only people giving as part of their desire to make their communities better? Or is there going to have to be some other fuel that we're dumping into it to truly make our communities better?
Actually, I think there's a slight misconception here, because if you look at some of the larger corporations that are now in existence, some of them actually started out as civic hacking experiments. So the idea that you can't look at something from a civic hacking perspective and say, well, this is going to be a toy for me, or I'm just going to do this. Some of these ideas will actually become very viable companies. So you get both sides of it. To the point, is it sustainable? Absolutely, because there is always that pull to create something new, to solve a problem. That's when we as a species are at our best, is when we have a problem, is to actually figure out how to solve it. And the upside of it is, if you're solving it for yourself, the odds are you're solving it for 100,000 other people. So problems are not generally just yours; they span. So now you can start to leverage that. You started out for good, but it can become a sustainable business for you.
All right, Raj, do those students who are coming and spending time with you, do they see the business opportunities in the social and civic hacking?
Sure, some of them will. And even if they don't, the students who are coming for a lot of other reasons. One is just like to do something they find meaningful. Then, there's also a lot of practical reasons, because coming to an opportunity like this is they solve very interesting challenges. They get exposure to a lot of companies or a lot of interesting get to work with interesting folks in Georgia Tech and so on. So that's, there are a lot of benefits to that. In general, to answer your question about whether the volunteer model is sustainable, I don't think it is sustainable just as a volunteer model without this other stuff happening, like companies getting started, corporations putting in funding, and all of that. I mean, just having volunteers is not enough. One of the most interesting conversations I had when I was talking about starting data science for social good in Atlanta with the Chicago organizers was the guy who started the program in Chicago. His name is Raeed Khani. Before he started data science for social good as part of University of Chicago, his job was chief scientist of the Obama 2012 campaign. So he had a lot of experience in organizing huge amounts of volunteers and data. So you can imagine. So one of the biggest things he told me about hackathons was that he didn't believe that hackathons should be can solve problems really, because they're just time constrained and so on. You can only build right prototypes or can come up with good ideas. However, the biggest value of hackathons is getting a group of people together who really passionately care about a topic. Because that's the power, when you get those people together, connecting awesomeness.
Yeah, and I think in our human natures, we want to take the pain away from somebody else, right? So the idea of passion, everyone's like, I need to find my passion. The root of passion is suffering. So if you really want to be about passion in something, you have to be able to suffer. But I think the add to that is compassion is to suffer together. And so you see people who are wanting to find jobs and finding greater meaning in their professional life, and you're seeing more corporations take on the bigger purpose. And actually, Mohammed Yunus, the Grameen Bank and Grameen Foundation, is really a strong advocate, saying the only business model, only way to solve world problems is through business. Business is the most effective way to do it. And so, how can we take the principle of showing compassion to other people, but do it in a way that actually feeds the sustainability of the organization? I think is the inherent challenge of any organization, be for-profit or non-profit, because in the end, they're organizations that require resources. It just depends on who's going to take home the profit.